So my name is Carmen Medina, and I am a victim of a random collision between unusual suspects. ARG. Why did I say ARG? Today is Talk Like a Pirate Day. I don't understand. I really do not understand how BIF could not acknowledge that. So, but I did. So as Saul was saying, I first came to BIF 3 years ago when I spoke at BIF 6 about many things, but largely about being a heretic at CIA and about the rebel alliance that we informally formed at CIA. And I get this question a lot when people find out that I'm from CIA, and I just want to tell you right now that I have never seen an episode of Homeland. So don't come to me afterwards and ask me whether or not I think it's realistic. Even if I did, I wouldn't tell you, and I haven't seen the episode. I hate spy fiction in general. Anyway, I had a great time, and I think actually the last line of the talk was something I said that I deeply believe in, and we've had several optimists talk already here at BIF, and you're looking at another one, which is that optimism is the greatest form of rebellion, right? And I was very pleased with that. It was a great meme until several days later when I was just casually surfing Twitter to see how many retweets that had gotten it's true, right? When I noticed that a Tea Party group from Michigan had retweeted it with great approval. And then I thought, well, okay, time to move on. So anyway, I thought, well, why were people so receptive to my message about being a heretic at work? And I thought then, afterwards, and again here at BIF this time, the reason why is that most of the people talking at BIF, because that's the landscape of innovators, are independent agents. They're outside of a large organization. They're entrepreneurs. And so they have a lot of, it's very difficult. I'm not saying that's easy, but they're answering to themselves, and they're not trying, for the most part, to overturn something that's been around for a long time. And even if they are, they're trying to do it from the outside. So like they're building an alternative educational model. And I was one of the few speakers that time who at the time I just retired, had come directly from the belly of the beast, right? I was one of those. I spent 32 years at CIA, and I spent a lot of that time like those poor suckers that someone talked about yesterday, working for evil incarnate managers, right? And while I was one of those worker bees, being a heretic, being a rebel, I discovered that I was very uncomfortable doing that. And as I told the story last time, one of the two guardian angels that I really am convinced that I've encountered in my life, and if I have enough time, I'll tell you at the end the story of the second one, came up to me and said, Carmen, I can tell you're a heretic at where you work. And I was like stunned. And she said, you've got to learn to be uncomfortable. So I could tell that story, and I could tell people related to it. And then eventually, which is the deep, dark secret of my career, I became a very senior manager in the agency. And I would be in these really important interagency meetings, trying to resolve important foreign policy issues. And often when I went into these meetings, I was the only woman in the room. And for sure, I was the only Puerto Rican in the room. And now you know. And right? And we would be talking about this issue, and I would come to the meeting because there's always briefing papers, and I would think that there's a fundamental flaw in what we're discussing there. Somebody has to talk about this elephant in the room, right? And I love the AV people here. By the way, they're incredible, and we should give them a hand. Anyway, I would wait for 20 or 30 minutes to see if any of the men we're going to mention the elephant in the room. Did any of those men ever do that? No, so I would go, are you kidding? Is it up to me, the only woman and the Puerto Rican in the room, to mention this? And what would happen to me when I would say those things? I was branded yet again even more deeply as an outsider. So speaking of elephants, the reason why I have this picture up, and this is a bit of a transgression, is that I just came back from a trip to Southern Africa. And I know one of my traveling companions is in the room with me. One of the people that went on this trip, there were 14 of us, was my 78-year-old mother. And she's great, but as she's getting older, she's losing some of her ability to speak. And English is her second language, and somehow it's all becoming more complicated for her. So one day when we got back from the game drive, we were sitting around, and she starts talking about elephant pennies. And we're like, what are elephant pennies? And finally, in the context of the conversation, it became clear that she was talking about elephant penises. That is a true story, and is apropos of nothing in particular. But as I get older, but I wanted to say the word penis on stage at BIF. Thank you. But as I've gotten older, there's a couple of things that I've concluded. Back to the men in the room, right? I've concluded one, why don't those men speak up? And women can be part of that too. So I don't mean to be picking on you guys. No, now I actually realize why I mentioned the word penis. It was sort of Freudian. Anyway, I've come to realize that there's a worldwide conspiracy for the preservation of mediocrity, right? And we are not all of us are conspirators, but many of us are unwitting conspirators. Raise your hand, right? I've been an unwitting conspirator. And the other thing I've realized now that I've retired from the agency is a lot of the things that I blame the CIA for, I realize now are symptoms of large organization disease. And lots of organizations have large organization disease. So we need to set out to cure it. So after I spoke, the random collisions began. Lots of people came up to me to talk. Deb came up to me. For some reason, I'm thinking of you as Disco Fields, because I think of you in terms of your Twitter handle. Deb Mills Schofield came up to talk to me. By the way, hello, Cleveland. Hello, Cleveland. Where are you? Yeah, exactly. And Lois Kelly came up to talk to me. And then I found out afterwards that Lois, after that session in BIF, drove home with what you have to call a BIF hangover, right? And in fact, she had such an intense hangover that she told me she missed her exit going home because all she could think about was rebels at work, and why isn't anybody helping rebels become better rebels, become more effective? So later that fall, she sends me an email, and she comes to spend a day in DC, I think she was there otherwise, where she wanted to talk about what rebels at work could be. Fast forward a couple of years. So we have a website, we have followers. These are some of the people who have filled out their profile at rebelsatwork.com and told us their story about being a rebel. I urge you from the bottom of my heart, go to the website and fill out a profile. We don't have hardly enough of them to be able to come back at the gnarly academic who will go, well, you haven't done enough research. Takes about 20 minutes to fill out your website. And we even have a promotional video.
Everyone in an organization doesn't need to be a rebel, but every organization needs its rebels. Hi, I'm Lois Kelly from Rebels at Work. Rebels are the people who understand how to get an organization from where it is today to where it wants to be. And they're the people who are trying to save their organizations from disruptive outside forces that are changing everything. Forces in industry, in society, even in the world.
They are not your problem. They are not your enemy. They are trying to help you. They are probably the start of your solution.
The challenge is most of us are never taught how to create change at work. How to take our idea and make it real and get it through the system. How do you build the right relationships with the right people? How do you use conflict and not be afraid of it? How do you communicate an idea so that it wins hearts and minds and support from the right people? And how to take care of ourselves so we don't become cynical and bitter. Or even worse, how do you make sure you don't get thrown under the bus? It's time to teach people how to create change inside organizations, how to lead it, even if they're not leaders. This is our mission at Rebels at Work. We hope you'll join us because the world needs us now more than ever before.
Okay, woohoo! So by the way, we have information about Rebels at Work in a flyer on the a book table. So there's lots of learnings that we have accumulated that we've learned from each other. Just going to mention a few of them briefly. The importance for Rebels at Work to master the bureaucratic landscape in their organizations. People like us, we disdain bureaucracy, but if you're really going to make headway, you have to understand the bureaucratic black belts in your organization and know how to defeat their passive aggressive behavior. Right? Word. You have to avoid Admiral Akbar moments. Who knows what an Admiral Akbar moment is? Come on, everybody, say it together. It's a trap, right? There's so many traps that rebels fall into. They get really enthusiastic, naively so, when they're asked to join a working group, which is, of course, a group that does no work in an organization, right? And they spill their guts out, therefore identifying themselves as someone never to be trusted again, right? Another one that I really like to talk about is the Athena trap, where you have an idea for changing the status quo, and the status quo expects you, like Athena was born fully formed out of Zeus's forehead. They expect you to know everything about how your new idea in the organization is working. And what you do is you fall into that trap. You develop 50-page-long PowerPoints that explain that, making it all the easier for people to pick you apart. And the last one I want to mention is you need to prepare, as Lois mentioned, you need to prepare for conflict. I think most of the people who are innovative rebels at work, they hope that they'll be able to make headway without engaging in conflict. But crunchy and constructive conflict is an indicator that your idea is being taken seriously. And for those of you who are managers and are actually trying to help a rebel at work, but sort of want your leadership to come to a consensus decision, please stop that. Right? Consensus is a way to avoid making decisions. So where are rebels needed today? First, I just want to say that the millennials coming up seem to be naturally rebels at work. And if any of you walk by at lunch Angela talking to about 30 students about how to make sure that their voices are heard, you saw that energy in action. But some other places where you need rebels, where we need those millennials, education. All I have to ask is how many of you are here from some kind of education activity? I know I've met a lot of you. The consumer economy desperately needs to be reinvented, right? You know, the church, the Bible says we will always have the poor with us. But the real problem is not that so much as that we will always have the cynics with us who take advantage of people who have less capacity to make money. That's got to stop. And the field that I really think desperately needs rebels at work is the national security field. Blah, 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 Wolf Blitzer. Blah, 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 George Stephanopoulos. This conversation is so barren. And people, you know, there's a high barrier to entry because it's something that you have to be an expert on to make sense of. The world desperately needs for us to rethink our national security paradigms. In all of these areas, we need rebels at work. We need them to join the river of innovation. I think innovation is a river of constantly refreshed new ideas. And when organizations don't listen to their rebels, who are the tributaries flowing into that river of new ideas, they're damming themselves up and they're gonna die. So my second guardian angel story. So almost 30 years ago, I flew from Paris to New York first class. I'd never done that before in my life. And I sat next to this woman who was very wealthy. She was actually on the first part of a round-the-world trip to visit all the places she and her recently deceased husband had been at together. She was probably in her early 70s. I could tell at the beginning she was very annoyed to be sitting next to me. I think she was slightly claustrophobic, she told me. But we had a great 9 hours together. I drank champagne with her. I ate caviar with her. I drank Michelob beer and cold cuts with her. At the end, she said to me, "Carmen, you're young and you're not going to pay attention to the words of an old lady like me. But I want you to know, when you get to be my age, you won't care about jewelry. You won't care about the things you have. There are only two things that will matter to you, the places you've been and the people you've been there with." So where are we now? BIF. Look around. Some of the people that you're with now are going to end up being some of the most important people in your lives. Ahoy!